Welcome to the Author Blurb podcast. Here, we're here to connect readers and authors so that the readers, you, can find that book or that author you're going to love. So I appreciate you being here. Get ready, enjoy the show, enjoy knowing the authors, and remember, subscribe, tell people about the show, and go buy the author's books, because if you like listening to them and you think they're interesting, they're going to love hearing from you. So I'm here with Roy M. Griffis, who's written 13 novels. Right now, at the time of this interview, there's 9 in print. But Roy, you said that you have the other ones coming back out. So I'm looking forward to hearing about your books, looking forward to learning about them, because the one thing that actually caught my attention was the line of your Cthulhu is Lovecraft with laughs. So to me, that sounds entertaining, and a good horror movie or a good scare with some laughter is always interesting. So instead of me just going in and describing everything about you and your books and this and that, because you sound very interesting, everything you've done, what so have you. Can you tell? I mean, honestly, you're on the profile that I have for you. It says that you're a National Guard screenwriter. You've written 13 novels, and like I said, 9 are in print now. You have a slew of other things going on. What was one of the taglines I saw on that? You don't just write adventures, you live them.
Yeah, I did a little of that.
So help me understand a bit about yourself so that the readers and I can learn about you, and then we can talk a bit about your books as well, if you don't mind.
Sure. Wow. Well, it's, being a novelist or I think any kind of writer, it gets lonely. So given the opportunity to talk something like this, I might not shut up. I discovered that when I started writing novels, my 6-book historical fiction series, in my mind, since this was the first novel I'd actually done, was going to be one book. Well, it turned out to be like 6 books and 500,000 words and 6 years of my life. Yeah. So, like I said, I may rattle on. Wow. Let's see. Well, you've touched on the high points already. I was actually in the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right, man. They're easily confused since nobody really pays attention to them. I was the 62nd Aviation Rescue Swimmer in the Coast Guard. That was no doubt influenced a lot by all the pulp stuff I read when I was a kid. I loved reading as a kid, and during a particularly tough time when I was about 10, excuse me, I ran across Edgar Rice Burroughs, writer of Tarzan, and his book, his series, the Mars series, the first book, Princess of Mars, which I think he wrote in 1913, and it was like this immediate success because it was such a gripping story, and it sure worked for me when I was 10 because, like I said, it was a tough time at home, and I picked this book up for, I swear, a quarter, and I went back and I sat down and I read it, and I went to Mars, man, for like 10 hours. Me and John Carter kicking Thark butt on Mars. And I came back, and this was like my first religious experience because I still remember to this day, putting the book down and just being amazed by the magicalness of it, the way it completely transported me out of where I was, which I didn't want to be in, to this whole new land. And I remember clearly saying, I'm going to be a writer, and never looked back, man.
So you knew at 10 years old you were going to be a writer.
Yep. Like I said, religious experience changed my life, and we blame it all on Edgar Rice Burroughs after that.
I see. See, I had a different experience at 10 years old. I thought I was going to wear a 3-piece suit. For some reason, I saw a TV show, and I thought that the guy looked very dapper, and I'm like, well, he looks important. So that was always my thought, and obviously, I don't think I own a couple suits, and I barely ever touched them. So we all don't go where we thought we were at 10 years old. So I'm kind of surprised you did. So did you actually start writing when you were 10, or what did you actually do?
Well, it turns out I started writing before that, and I just hadn't really remembered it. Cleaning out my grandmother's house after she died, I found a story I'd written when I was 7 for school, and it was something about being one of the coyotes in the mountains and what it was like. It really looked like it was influenced by Jack London, but I hadn't read him yet. So yeah, I guess I'd always sort of had that tendency. And yeah, I believe I wrote Bad Burroughs fan fiction in 6th grade, which through the grace of God has been lost, to the mists of time. And yeah, and then I knew from what little I learned that I had to learn to type, because you can't send in stories that are handwritten. So
Not
7th
anymore.
grade, yeah, 7th grade, I learned to type as fast as I could, and I bought an old typewriter for probably like $10, and I just started writing stories, man. And whatever else I've done, man, even jumping out of helicopters. I was on some boats in the Coast Guard. I'd be up in the middle of the night after mid-watch, walking around the ship, making sure nothing was on fire, no one was dead, and we weren't sinking. But I'd be sitting out there in the galley with a little portable typewriter on my lap, working on plays. Because I went from short stories, and meanwhile I'm still reading. Right, I'm reading all this stuff. I'm reading Burroughs and Heinlein and Niven, and then I got into fantasy, probably the easier fantasy. But I discovered I was much more of a story guy.
Okay.
Right? Story and characters. I wanted to know what happened. So things like Asimov, I've never read a complete Asimov novel in my life because they kind of bored me. I don't know. They seemed too excited about trying to get the science right. I didn't care. I just didn't care. So, but I would still read, like The Mote in God's Eye, which is a great first contact novel. But and then I branched out to other stuff. Like I'd say right now, my favorite novel is Watership Down by Richard Adams. Have you read that?
I've seen the Netflix adaptation of it.
Yeah.
And I have the book on my list of books. See, here's my problem, and I've said this numerous times throughout my shows. I have so many books at this point that my wife has banned me from buying books. Well, let me phrase that. Banned me buying books for myself. I can buy them for my kids. So the only time I get new books for me to read is when an author sends me something because I'm not buying it. So ebooks, I do reviews now on different books. So I'll get those books. I'll review them. The books that people send me, I get those. So my wife's like, well, I can't say nothing if you send them to me. So yeah, my cats are off to the side. I kind of taught them to stay away after a few of these. Trust me, they have a habit of moving the camera for me.
Oh, bless them.
Yes. You got to love cats. I think it seems like almost every writer, or the majority of them, either has a cat or a dog. Yeah. But the majority of them, I always hear cats.
Yeah. I love animals, but and I never really was a dog guy, but they're growing on me. But cats, you can't make a cat like you, man.
No.
Dogs are a little codependent, typically.
Well, here's what I find funny is that I've actually been told, because I was in a discussion with somebody about, because you always have the dog people and the cat people have a back and forth, which one's better. Mm-hmm. And somebody made this point, and they were trying to make it in the dog's favor, but it didn't sound like it to me. They said, cat people are people that like to have a creature living in their house that doesn't always like them, but you have to kind of make the connection with them. So they only come to you when they want your love. A dog is for the people that need somebody always there, always wanting love, always wanting that affection. I'm like, well, that makes sense. My cat is, because at the time I had this cat that was just mean to everybody. Right. Literally, people were scared of her. But I loved her to death. When my wife and I first got married, my wife was scared of her for years until she got too old to fight. So I mean, but I thought about that, and yeah, it seems like people that like dogs tend to be the ones that always want that constant attention.
Yeah.
Cat people are the people who can say, okay, you go do your thing. If you want some attention, come to me, or I'll pet you as I walk by. So yeah, I think that fits pretty closely to what I've seen.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's just weird. I've always liked cats, and
Eh,
but animals are good.
yeah. So let's get back to your books because call me funny. I don't think a lot of people want to hear us talk about our cats and our theories. So
But
what?
but who couldn't love this face?
Oh, I agree. It's a cute
Yeah.
kitty.
Yeah, she's great. Okay, back to my
I'm not
books.
arguing that.
All right, so let's see, short stories. Then I got into plays because probably when I was about 15, I had this. I just sort of had this creative evolution, and I noticed. I mean, I knew I loved movies, and it just struck me one day that like a movie at the time, and I think it's still true. A movie is the closest thing to a shared dream we could come to, right? Dark room, 500 strangers, and especially if it's a good film, you can like have all these shared emotions, right? You can laugh together, cry together, and all that sort of stuff. And so I drifted into writing plays because at the time it was easier to read plays and see how they worked, and also I could get my plays done once in a while.
Right.
And I actually had a goal of being a screenwriter. And meanwhile, I'm doing all that other stuff, right? I'm in the Coast Guard. I'm failing a couple of marriages and all that sort of stuff. Moving around a lot, but I'm still writing, man. And so wherever I was, whatever I did, I was writing. Then I after 3 or 4 years of being Errol Flynn in the Coast Guard, which was pretty awesome. I went to college and I got a degree in screenwriting and video production, a BFA, which as anyone knows, a BFA is typically amounts to BFD in the real world. But I actually worked for a year in Hollywood. I was a member of the Screenwriters Guild, and I became such a typical Hollywood story, and I have a whole lot of stories about how everything you've heard about Hollywood is more or less true. But in my case, I sold a TV movie to Fox, and then they fired that vice president and threw out all of his projects, including mine. So by then, I don't know, I was in my late 30s, and I had to take stock of my life and stuff. I was a single dad at the time, and just to give you some context, I had this midlife crisis when I was about 25. I'm precocious that way, right? I was kind of early on that.
Right.
I was divorced. I couldn't really sell any of my short stories. Although I had editors. This was back in the days when you actually sent short stories through the mail to editors. And I had some encouraging rejection slips, which I saved because they gave me just enough to go, okay, I'm not completely wasting my time. But at 25, I said, man, I got to figure out what's going on here. And, and I had to, it was sort of my vision quest. I hadn't had a rite of passage exactly, so I went and created one for myself in the Coast Guard. And so that was sort of this process of changing how I looked at myself, because I was a drama geek in high school, and I didn't learn to throw a softball until I was 22. And the rescue swimmer program was so new; it didn't have its own school in the Coast Guard. It was going to be taught by the Navy, and it was supposed to be the second toughest school in the Navy. And my rite of passage brain, which I didn't realize at the time, said, "There's your challenge, dude." And I realized I'd rather die knowing I tried, tried and failed. Not the optimal outcome, right? But
Right.
I would rather die knowing that than die wishing I'd even tried.
Right.
So, I survived rescue swimmer school, and I actually got to be at an operational school, Coast Guard station, which was kind of rare because it was so new. There weren't that many air stations that actually had live rescue swimmers, but I got to do it. So like I said, Errol Flynn, Tarzan, got to do all that stuff. Well, and so at about 38, I had to look at the screenwriting dream and say, I gave it a good shot. I didn't say, well, I wanted to or I wished I had. Well, I actually had, and people would, like my stuff. But I had to say, this one's not quite working out. I could stay here and beat my brains out and become bitter. But on the other hand, I've got like a 5-year-old kid who needs his dad, needs health insurance, toys for Christmas.
Yeah, they do like that.
Yeah, it seemed like the decent thing to do. So I said, well, I got to set that aside. And I was also tired of the whole Hollywood grind. I'm going to be honest. There's more stories about that. But so, but I can't just give up being, writing or creativity. So I ended up just kind of writing for myself. And then I wrote a short story that a small magazine read and said, hey, you told us this is part of a book. Like, well, yeah, I just, first chapter. And they said, let's see the rest of it. And then they wanted to publish it. And so that was nice. Zero money, zero fame involved, but still, they put it out there, and that was kind of nice affirmation. And the thing, just that element of saying, I'm just going to write this for myself now. Because in Hollywood, there are so many gatekeepers, and there's so many taste makers and trend chasers. So you'll do, you'll sweat blood for 6 months on a screenplay, and then I will tell this one short story. Had a really well-received, and it's actually my award-winning screenplay. It takes place in Korea during the Korean War, North Korea. And so I was in a meeting, which you do a lot of meetings and talking to people. And this one production executive told me, look, I got to get back to you because I need to go find out if it's okay to make the North Koreans a bad guy. And it's like my eyes started twitching because, dude, did you even read the script? This is set in the Korean War. The North Koreans are the bad guys. Anyway, so I just, stepping away from all that just freed me. And then I just kind of started writing novels because I had a couple of ideas. I have ideas all the time. And 2 ideas lined up one day. An idea I had when I was 23, an idea when I had when I was about 37, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's the beginning. Well, this could be the end. And I saw the path, so I sat down and I started writing the beginning. But I discovered I didn't write out a long outline. If you've seen the screenplay format and play formats, well, for anybody who hasn't seen them, they're almost like an architectural blueprint of what could be a film or it could be a play, but they're very structured. So I would imagine it'd be pretty hard to just sit down. Hey, I'm going to write a free-flowing screenplay in 3 days. I mean, you know how it is. You get inspired on a short story. You can knock out a 40-page short story in a day. It's going to be a long day, but you can do it.
Right.
But you're talking about a 300 or 400-page novel. Some people get really detailed, but I would do that for screenplays just to sort of free myself to the process. So I'd write a 20-page single-spaced short story essentially, and then I just start plugging it into the screenplay. And why I didn't do that with my novels, I found that over time that I would just sit down and start writing, and the cool thing was as long as I knew what the end was, I could fight my way there. I just can't start something without an end in mind. And originally I thought that first book was going to be a single book. But
this is your historical fiction book, correct?
Yeah, it's called By the Hands of Men. It starts in World War I. The beginning image was something a woman told me on a play we were working in, and this was, gee whiz, back in the early 80s, I guess, one of my plays. That her grandfather, she was English, her grandfather had told her the worst thing about being in the trenches in World War I you could imagine there's probably a lot of bad things, but to him the worst
Right.
thing was being stuck in the trenches and listening to the wounded horses scream and not being able to do anything. That was my sort of original image for the beginning of the story. And as long as I've got that, and I know where I think it should end up, I just start writing and I find my way there. I'm called a pantser. Everybody sees my pants. It's an old term, but
I'm one of them too, so I know well enough.
Yeah, I mean, I can't do it any other way. But yeah, so there was a point to all this. Anyway, so that's how I started writing my first novel that was, sort of self-contained. The other one was kind of a Rashomon series of following different characters. Each chapter was a different character. This was pretty much, following my two main characters. And, it became kind of really weird to me because, again, I never thought of myself as a novelist. Was that at a certain point, after having the discipline, I try to get up early every morning and write. That was imposed on me by work and parenthood and all that sort of stuff, and being married, because in the morning it's just you, the coffee, and the cat, right?
Yep.
And you can go. I discovered that even if I didn't think I knew what was going to happen, as long as I sat down, again, this was after a period of time.
Right.
As long as I sat down, put my fingers on the keys, the words were there. But it was almost a discipline that bordered on religious, in the sense of, I kept doing it, and then words kept happening, and then of course there was the issue of where I introduce a character and give them a name, and I think, okay, sort of a functional character. What in old plays used to call them the spear carriers. Hey, here I am.
Right.
I'm just proving this. Well, my spear carriers would start to show up again, and they'd start to have things to say and things to do, which was really cool. And at a certain point, I said, "Cool, all right, fine." That they have a purpose that is unknown to me at this time, and then, like I said, it turned out I couldn't shut up, and what was supposed to be one book then became a second, and then a third, and fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth.
No, let me ask something. So on the historical fiction series that you have, so a lot of people, their series, they tend to follow a main centralized character.
Right.
Occasionally, they'll do like kind of a spin-off, or they'll have like the main character kind of steps to the side and they give focus to another character. What does your historical fiction follow a specific person or group, or how does that work? How does the series go?
The point of view is actually, there's two main points of view. The two main characters, there's Robert Fitzgerald, who's an English lieutenant in the First World War, and there is Charlotte Branoff, who's a Russian immigrant, who's a volunteer nurse for the British. And they meet less than a mile from the front lines at a casualty clearing station, and it goes from there. And I'll alternate sections of the book, 40 or 50 pages at a time, from their point of view, what they're thinking, experiencing, and then they sort of, it's how they interweave. But then the following books were pretty much like books 2 and 4 are completely from Charlotte's point of view, following her, because it is a saga that goes across 4 continents and 2 decades. Books 3 and 5, I had a lot of fun with those titles. Books 3 and 5 are, following Robert, and then book 6 goes back to alternating between their viewpoints.
All right.
And there's some characters who repeat, but they're part of the story, but the story's not told necessarily from their point of view.
All right, so it's just 2 main characters over 2 decades, at least right now, and you said 4 continents.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of travel, a lot of interaction, all this stuff there, it sounds like. Now, the one thing I'm kind of really wanting to get into as well, because, like I said, the concept of the Cthulhu with laughs, or Lovecraft with laughs, how did you go from historical fiction to a, I guess, dark comedy or a comedy horror? I don't even know what genre it would be technically be considered at this point.
Well, just as a side note, that's the reason I don't have a writing career, is because I can't write the same thing over and over.
Right.
I just can't. You'll see a lot of people say write to market, and there are people who have 20 books, and I'm not going to be the guy who has 20 books in the shape-shifting sloth harem series. I would have to kill myself.
That sounds like a weird genre, but
yeah. But hey, the dinosaur porn guys make 40 G's a month, so there's probably a market for it. But it took me about 6 years to write this series. A lot of research, because I didn't want to just toss it off and make it bad Mary suing. And actually, one of the things I found that I do with my novels is I sort of set myself a creative challenge. Again, because I'll just bore myself, and I'm boring myself, I'll bore the reader.
right.
So for By the Hands of Men, the creative challenge was, okay, well, life was very different in the end of the First World War, being in the Jazz Age. We got the Edwardian old world, coming up against the Jazz Age. But I said, I'm going to write this book as if it had been written contemporaneous with the events of the story, almost as if it was the biography of these two people written, in the 1919, 1920. So what that did was, that changed my vocabulary that I could use. It changed syntax. It forced me to, for instance, when I was writing about tough subjects, like war or sex, you could write about those, but you had to approach it in a certain way. You couldn't take the easy way out with what I think of as the pornography of graphic, gory descriptions, right?
Right.
Same with sex. So what I found it forced me to do, so I did all that, but one of the things I ended up doing was I found I was writing a lot of scenes with a hole in the center. I would write around things because I wanted people. My goal as a writer is to get people really engaged and have that emotional journey.
Right.
Those are the books I love. They take me sort of on an emotional journey. I care. I like somebody, but if I care, that's the kind of I like. That's the kind of write. So it made me work harder. I didn't have the easy outs of the entrails and gushing blood and all that sort of stuff. And the same thing with sexy. So it wasn't an easy thing to write, but I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out. And so about 6 months after I finished it, I kind of needed to take a break and take a deep breath. And we moved to Texas, Texas is awesome if anybody wants to know. And I was just about feeling like, I think it's time to start gearing up. And I've got I swear 20 novels in my head right now that are they're right there, just staring at me saying, why are you talking to this guy? Why aren't you writing me? And I was just like, okay, I'm going to pick one that calls to me and I'm going to work on. And my high school girlfriend, who had been my first love and my first fan, and she had always been my fan, bless her heart, no matter how many miles apart we were. She was always asking. Well, she died suddenly, just out of nowhere, and tragically. And to my surprise, that kicked my slats in, man. I was really gutted by that. Because I thought I'd have 20 more years to send her, here's one of my novels, read it, and let me tell you. And so I was dealing with that grief, and and then 6 months later, my mom died.
Oh, geez.
So for about a year, man, it was worthless, right?
Yeah.
And when I finally started kind of clawing myself out of that, I said, man, I can't write anything serious to save my life. And so I had this this throwaway line in my head one day. I was reading resumes on LinkedIn for my job, and at the time, the term everybody had to use. You know how in corporate worlds they go through trends, and
The
so maybe
buzzwords.
it's the buzzword. Oh gosh, death by buzzword. Well, the
Trust me,
buzzword.
my mom's HR, so she's told me all about. So I know well enough what you're talking about.
All right. So the buzzword of the year was thought leader. Everybody was a thought leader. And I'm going, you can't all be thought leaders. I'm sorry. And I just said to myself, what is a more fatuous buzzword than thought leader? And for some reason, the term "the blithering excrescence from beyond the stars" leaped into my head.
Okay.
And a lot of my writing comes from, I mean, I have these ideas, but a lot of my writing is generated by asking questions. I mean, if I hear a story, like the story of, okay, so you're in the trenches, you hear those wounded horses screaming. What are you going to do about it? What would I do? What would somebody do? Or why wouldn't they do? That really just asking a question. How come? Why not? Why the guy stay in the Alamo? All that stuff. So those are a lot of my questions. And so my question for this was, well, who would have this title on their resume? And for some reason, I said, well, clearly somebody who works for the Cthulhu organization. And it just went from there. So it was just sort of this throwaway line. I came up with my opening scene. I don't know if you read the opening scene.
Not yet, I haven't.
Okay,
it's on my, like I said, you're on my list. It's a list I'm trying to work through for a while.
Got it. Well, it's just then it just became sort of the thought, since I've worked in corporate America for 20 plus years now. You begin to get the idea that any organization's got support people, right? I mean, church, whoever. So it occurred to me, well, if the Cthulhu organization, or Cthulhu Amalgamated, as I end up calling it, has an organization, so who's their support staff? Who's going to be, who are the guys buying the toilet paper and writing the travel vouchers and sending out paychecks or where they are? And I just went from there. And it became Shuggas, who are like the schlubs of the Lovecraftian world.
Right.
So obviously they're doing a lot of the scut work. And I don't know, man. I just started playing with that. And I wrote this opening scene of some Shugga sitting in his office on a chair made of bones, drinking a hot mug of the blood of a thrice damned hanged man. And he gets a call that he doesn't want to take. Who hasn't, right? And it just started unfolding. And like, for instance, the thing from HR, I hate to say this because it gives away one of the jokes. Well, HR in this case stands for human restraint.
Okay.
Right. So I don't know. It just started opening up to me, and the creative challenge I set to myself on this book, this book and series of books, was I am not going to censor myself at all. I've been so serious and so sad. If it is goofy, if it makes me laugh or chuckle or even seems vaguely funny, I'm gonna write it. And I just did. I just wrote it, man.
All right. Now, how many books are in that series? Remind me, because you didn't just stop at the first one, because if I remember correctly, I want to say there's 4 or something like that, if I'm thinking correctly.
Well, there's 3 published, and I'm working on the 4th now. So,
okay.
The first book was The Thing from HR. And by the way, if you're an audiobook person out there, it's a great audiobook. You should listen to Sample and Audible. I got this English guy. He slays me. He totally got what I was trying to do. Second book is The Auditors of Doom. And the third book is called The Break Room of 1,000 Nightmares. Because, if you haven't been in the corporate world, you recognize it is kind of a hell in some ways. But, and they're all sort of standalone. They help you, reading the previous books help you get the relationships, but it isn't like, Lord of the Rings at the end, they're going to throw H.P. Lovecraft into Mount Doom or something. they're sort of in the same world, but it just helps you get context.
All right, makes sense. So, what do you said you're writing the fourth book for that series now?
Mm-hmm.
What is the theory behind it? Because one, you've already given people an insight that if they're going through it, and me personally, I love audiobooks, so I'll probably find you on audiobook and give one of those. But
Hit me up, man. I got a code for you. All I'm asking for is a review.
oh, trust me, like I told you, I'm doing reviews now. So when I do a review, it's going up, and I think I get criminy, one review's already had 200 views on YouTube and 1,000 or so downloads. So the
Sweet.
reviews are doing pretty well.
Nice.
Now, with that being said, what is expected on the fourth book of this series? Because we have the HR, we have auditors, which makes me laugh because my wife's in accounting. We have the break room, and I'm picturing a break room that I used at a company I used to work at, where it was always the most awkward of conversations you had with people like, I just want to get my coffee and get back to my desk and leave me alone.
Yeah.
So what's coming in the fourth one?
I'm kicking around different titles, but I want to say it is right now the working title. I got to pull this up, and this is weird. You should think I don't. Oh, there we go. The Supply Closet of Eternal Terror.
Okay, that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that, are you how much of Lovecraft are you pulling in, or I guess I should ask this as well. Did you actually read Lovecraft, or did you just do some research? Because I've heard of some people that just like the theory of Lovecraft, but don't really know much about them.
I read Lovecraft right after high school, and I remember reading The Call of Cthulhu, and I remember reading it going, okay, this is messed up. Special, but messed up, right? And I mean, it did take a special kind of lunacy to come up with it. So yeah, I've read Lovecraft, and I've read some of the other guys. I've not read them in a while, and so for the first book, when I first started, everybody knows Cthulhu, and so I was making jokes about that, like they call him the Big C, Cthulhu. There's Cognosceti, and some of the words I wrote I can't pronounce. The Cthulhu Cassetti or something, the cool kids. But
right.
But I realized at a certain point, people were pulling most of these names out of their ass anyway.
Right.
So I said, okay, I'm gonna stick with Lovecraft for two reasons. One, it's in the public domain, right? And because I didn't want to, and two, because I didn't want to swipe somebody's creative work of creating. I mean, a lot of people landed in there and done their work and come up with some pretty impressive stuff. So I would end up creating my own unpronounceable consonant names, and then just trying to give them sort of offbeat titles, like the Blithering Excrescence from Beyond the Stars. Then there's let's see, the Dominatrix of the Outer Reaches, and the Hounds of This, and the Mailmen of Kismet, who apparently are very, very, very scary. So it ended up mostly, certainly having that Cthulhu paradigm of the outer gods, the older gods, and the elder things, and the near elder things, and all that. But I ended up mostly doing it, creating stuff of my own.
All right. So with that, you have the Cthulhu series going. You have the historical series. Are you expanding on the historical, or do you have anything else coming out? Or you said, because like you said, you have 20 different books in your head. Literally, I know my the software I use for my writing, it allows you to list every project. I think I have 20, not 20. I have 10. I think 10, because I cleared it off the other day of ones that just I don't even remember what I was thinking about.
Hmm.
So I'm like, okay, I didn't even start writing. I can't think of what that is. What other projects are you looking at going into, or have you started?
Oh, first, what software do you use for writing?
I use a program called Bisco, or it's Bisibco, I think it is. And I I mispronounce more things than I can count it in my lifetime at this point.
Do me a favor, send me a link. I'd like to look at that. I use
Yeah,
Word. You know.
it's a great program. I personally love it because it's simple. It allows you to organize, and they have a free version and a paid version.
Mhm.
In the paid version allows you to go and make series and all this.
Okay.
So yeah, what I'll do is I'll send you the link for it so you have that. And in case anyone else is interested, I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Great.
But one thing is that with that, like I said, I cleaned out a lot of my projects. I know I'm working on a memoir. I'm working on a food service book. I'm working on a angel and a demon at a bar. I mean, I have a slew of different ranges I'm looking at.
Okay.
So, and then of course, I have my organized crime thrillers as well.
Right.
But what? So, like you said, you have the historical fiction.
Mhm.
You have your Cthulhu, which sounds entertaining as can be.
Mm.
So, what else do you have, or are you going to stick with those two right now?
Well, it's a funny thing, uh, and you probably know this already, and if folks are out there who are not self-published, which is not that hard.
Right.
Doing it well is hard, but still.
Yes.
One of the cool things about being self-published is hearing from readers, right?
Hmm.
That was you, right?
Yep.
It is such a treat to get an email from somebody saying how much they like the book, and I've got letters from really interesting people in New Zealand and Australia. A guy who was in the Dutch Indies militia during World War II, a woman who worked for Dudley Moore and Peter Cook in the swinging '60s in London, and I'm telling
Nice.
her, write this stuff down. But
Yeah.
but I've had people really like the By the Hands of Men series, and people have been asking me, when are you going to write book 7? And I sort of I feel an ethical obligation if people have invested in this series like they have, like I really need to finish that. So,
Right.
well, it's finished, but I still have more stories I could tell. So I'm thinking about book 7 of that. My publisher asked me to write book 4 of Cthulhu Amalgamated, and since I have an idea, which I like, I'm going to do it. And that's the other thing is, if I don't really have an idea, I'm just not going to grind something out. If
Right.
I'm not engaged or passionate about the story, ultimately I'm just not going to do it. But there's those. I'm about a third of the way through with Cthulhu Amalgamated, the storeroom. But after that, I've got a series idea. Geez, I've got a novel about a a merchant seaman who comes home to find out that his wife is dead and nobody told him, and then he goes hunting for the female vampire who killed her.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I've got at least let's see, I've got a kind of a cozy mystery series set at a private airport in East Texas. That's about 5 books. I've got another one about paranormal one. That could be 3 books or more. I've got a standalone kind of a horror novel set in 1969 in upstate New York, in the Poughkeepsie area. If you've ever been up there, it's got weird ravines and cliffs, so it's kind of a spooky thing. Let's see. I had another series that just came to me about a month ago. And also sort of paranormal. So
You have a list. It sounds like
yeah,
you have So
yeah.
it sounds like there's still a whole lot more coming from you on that front.
Oh yeah, and that's to say nothing of I've got this play I want to write. about the making of the film Casablanca. The author of this great book, if you like movies, it's a great book about the making of Casablanca, called something like, it's had a couple titles, but the first one was Round Up the Usual Suspects.
Right.
It was retitled, The Making of Casablanca. The author's name is Al-Jean Harmitz. She was a New York Times reporter who was covering the film industry in New York, in Los Angeles. She's about 92 now. And I was trying to get the rights from her to write a play about it, because it's such a great book, and the story of how they made this movie. I mean, this was like they made this American myth, and
Right.
the story of how it was done. So I'd like to do that. I got screenplays I want to write. So yeah, man, I got all kinds of stuff.
Well, you sound like you're keeping yourself quite busy. So let me do this. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I believe you also had something that you had coming up you had to get to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the recording for everybody else. I appreciate you being here. I'd like people to know that you have a profile on authorblurb.com. There's a link to it in the show notes as well. Where do you prefer people to go find you if they want to reach out to you, if they want to find your books, if they have questions, what so have you?
I have a website. It's roymgriffis.com. Love to talk to people there. That's always fun. You can find me on Facebook at Roy M. Griffis Storyteller. I'm on Twitter, and I have an account on Twitter and Instagram. Right. Don't do a lot with those, but I'd say Facebook and my website are two ways you can reach me on my website. My email address is all over it. And my books are available on Amazon and Kobo and Barnes & Noble. And the audiobook for The Thing from HR is available in a lot of places, but it's also on Amazon and audible.com.
Sounds perfect. Well, Griff, I appreciate you being here again. It's been fun talking with you. I'm telling you, when your fourth book comes out for the Cthulhu Corporation, or amalgam, I can never say that word.
Amalgamated. I can't spell it. I always get it wrong. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not even going to try to. So I appreciate you being here. When that comes out, reach out to me. I'd love to have you back on to talk about it a bit more. Hopefully by that time I've gone through your other books and got to get a better insight. But with that being said, I'm going to have you hold on. Yeah.
One thing. I think we should flip this sometime and let me interview you, because I'm curious about you. I'm looking at all this stuff on your shelves. I want to know about those. I want to know about your crime thrillers. So let's flip this sometime, and we'll interview you for the people who follow this podcast.
Sounds good. We'll set that up.
Okay.
Who knows? Maybe as soon as I get one of my next books out, we'll schedule a time to have you on, and you and I'll talk about it.
I'd like that, man.
Sounds perfect. So I'm going to have you hold on. But for everybody else, you now know you're going to be seeing Griff come back to talk to me again about either his book, my book, who knows. Yeah. Other than that, appreciate you. And right. Griff, hold on for just a second.
Okay. Thanks, watchers, listeners.
You can go to authorblurb.com, where there's plenty of stuff there for you to find. Enjoy another author. Enjoy finding that book that you love. So take the time. Do me a favor. Share, subscribe, enjoy the show, and tell others. Thank you.